All right, it's Politics and Parenting, where we talk about politics from the parent's point of view. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Kent. He's a local media personality and founder of Geeky Stoics. He's also the author of How the Force Can Fix the World. You might have seen him on our local Fox 5, and he's now running for Manassas City Council. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Mr. Mayhugh.
Good to see you too, buddy. So we actually know each other because of family, right? Like that's kind of how we met.
Yes.
You had just moved to the area, and I think I followed you on Twitter. I think because of Matt Lewis or whatever, and we kind of reached out because it was during COVID, and you just moved to the area. How was that for you as a parent, like having to be in the lockdown with a young child alone?
Yeah, I think I had a very acute sense very early on with COVID and being cooped up, with our daughter and as a family, that this was going to be sort of a national trauma, that this was going to be the sort of event that kids her age will talk about when they have gray hair, that they will never forget. Sort of the way that I've never forgotten where I was, what I was doing, and how my parents reacted on 9/11. It's sort of these turning point moments, these hinge moments as a child where sort of not the innocence dies, but the reality of the world becomes a little bit more clear. That everything is not simple. And I think that that's what I was thinking about a lot during that time, was just how is my daughter going to think about this and how can we make the best of it? I remember in the first week, we made like a family music video, like singing a song about COVID-19 and how it's ruining everything. And it was like a joke. And we've watched that video recently, and we're like, ooh, it didn't age very well, because we thought it was going to like be over, in a week or two. The lockdown was going to be over, and that was it. And then it ended up being, a 2-year saga. So we watch it and we just cringe because it was about to not be funny anymore. It was about to be really serious and heavy and leave a mark on our child. But perspective changes over time. You get old and you look back on things that happened to you and things that shaped you, and you start to feel differently about them. Weird sidebar. I recently was doing my daughter's homeschool lessons, and we were doing a unit on 9/11, and we had to do sort of the lead up to 9/11. So we studied the Russian, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the U.S. funding of the Taliban, and the resistance against the Soviets there, and kind of all the things that led up to 9/11. And then we watched a 9/11 documentary, and I sobbed watching the towers flame. I've seen 9/11 footage a million times since I was 10 years old, because it's just part of our world. And you see news footage, you see replays. And this time I cried, and I had to like walk out of the room and go collect myself. And I don't know why. I don't know why that is, that at age 34, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And maybe it's because sitting there and trying to explain it to my child, I understand what I understand about her COVID experience, which is that this was when the world changed for me.
Yeah. You mentioned, making the best of a bad situation, which COVID was, it wasn't really great for anyone except for the people that made money off of it. But we connected, right? We became good friends. I look at that moment and I go, man, that's really cool, because it was an opportunity for us to meet. You had just moved into the area, we've hung out a lot since then, and so like what you did, I kind of did the same thing at home. Is like we played games, we did all these different things to like occupy our time that used to be spent out with our friends, but now we were locked inside our house. And
Board games,
I think
Ticket to Ride, man, Ticket to Ride. That was our game for the pandemic.
we do a game called Marbles and Jokers. It's like an adult version of Sorry, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, you look. I mean, we can't control the world, right? And you kind of write about this a lot with Geeky Stoics, in this idea that life is going to come at you, and you need to be able to like deal with it in different ways. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit about Geeky Stoics and like behind your philosophy, behind what you're writing and where you're moving, trying to guide people to.
Ooh, big question. Yeah. So geekystoics.com is my weekly email newsletter, as well as a YouTube channel and a podcast where we are basically trying to teach people philosophy 101, some just very basic philosophical principles that you will find in Eastern Zen Buddhism, as well as Western Greek and Roman Stoicism. The tenets of Stoicism are very simple. It's the spheres of control, focusing on the things that are within your control and letting go the things that are not. And for me, I'm a Star Wars author. I wrote this book called How the Force Can Fix the World, all about how sort of the core themes of Star Wars could make the world a better place if we listened to them. And the main theme of Star Wars, if you had to pick one, is actually that change is eternal. The twin suns right behind me, that they will always be setting, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. So change is perpetual, and you have to let go. And Star Wars is about how this kid named Anakin Skywalker could not let go of change and embrace things being beyond his control, and it led him to become a monster known as Darth Vader. So Geeky Stoics is about pop culture. We basically write about movies, great books, television shows, and go, hey, by the way, this movie, Zorro, or The Dead Poets Society, or Avatar: The Last Airbender on television, here is some very basic, timeless, real-world philosophy that these are drawing on, so that people can, I guess, understand where the ideas of sort of great stories come from. They're not made in a vacuum, that they are inspired by things, that knowledge is shared and passed down from philosophers to poets to artists who make movies and television shows and write books. So that's what we do. This morning, I was just writing an article and doing a podcast for Geeky Stoics on the Dead Poets Society, the old Peter Weiss, Robin Williams movie.
Yeah, we kind of chatted a little bit before, but that's one of my favorites. I love that movie. And I think that it's really important for people because politics can be really toxic, right? And you talk about like the ideas that you write about are passed down from philosophers to artists, and they make this content that entertains us, but there's also an underlying meaning behind it that we can learn from. And especially when you have a political society that's as toxic as ours, maybe you don't want to tune in and listen to the people that are in charge, but you can you can still learn the lessons that you need to learn in order to elect better people. So, it's not as toxic. And I think what you guys are doing at Geeky Stoics is really fantastic for that, because it's not as painful to have to go through, right? Like everybody has a favorite movie or a favorite character or a favorite villain too, right? Like we have our favorite villains that we like love to watch them fail over and over again, whether it's the Joker or the Penguin or Zod or whoever, we want that. And the more you invest into that, the more like you kind of get tied in. And I think, at least for me, I grew up very much in that entertainment world, watching movies and stuff, loved, all the sci-fi stuff. But I don't know if I took away the lessons when I was younger. It took me growing up and like reflecting and watching them back again. And the fact that you guys kind of walk you through the lessons, it's really helpful. Especially what I love to do is, and I'll be honest, I share your stuff with my teenagers a lot, because I think it's just a really great way to like, especially at that teenage year, like 12 to like 16, I think is really important in helping your kids understand theology and philosophy. And so, where I take my kids to church, but that's not the only thing in the world, and there's other ideas and thoughts out there as well, and they kind of all mesh fairly well together. But it is just good to like branch out and find any way you can to learn.
Yeah, and the Dead Poets article that I was writing this morning is about what I think is one of the understated takeaways from that movie. It's a movie that's like the inspirational drama, like classic. There's sort of an inspirational drama genre. Like Remember the Titans is another one, where it's just very memorable lines and hoorah moments and bumper sticker wisdom from a very charismatic lead. And they say things in the movie like "Carpe diem, seize the day, boys," and he's teaching the boys about how you're gonna die one day and you're gonna be fertilizer, and so you need to live for today. And he's reminding them that poetry is not about rhyme, that poetry, beauty, romance, these are the things that we stay alive for as human beings. He's telling the boys that there's a time for daring, but also a time for caution, and just helping them to think bigger about the world. I hope everybody has a teacher like this at some point in their life. But there's one lesson that I did not seize on when I was a kid, watching this movie a bunch as a teenager. And it's a scene where Robin Williams climbs up on the desk in the classroom, and he goes, "All right, now everyone form a line, and I want you to climb up on this desk and look out on the classroom. It's very important, boys, that we constantly look at things in a different way." And it's kind of cheesy, like, okay, like you're going to climb up on the desk and look out on the classroom so you see everything from above, and it's going to change your world. Like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about looking at the classroom from up high before. And so I ignored that one when I was younger. But I watched the movie yesterday, and it hit me. I was like, this is interesting, because I am looking at this movie now as an adult.
You're standing on the desk.
Yeah, I am. Like, when I watched the movie before, I was a teenager, and the teenagers were my peers. The mean adults were the bad guys. And Robin Williams was unquestionably the only person in the world who understands them and loves them for who they are. That's the way you view it when you're younger. But I was watching it yesterday as a dad, and the mean parents, the bad school administrators, I just saw them as people who are like trying their best. I didn't see some of the bad guys as bad guys anymore. And I didn't see the kids as my peers. I saw them as kids who, they're a mess. They're a mess. And that was different. And so for the first time, I actually climbed up on the desk and I saw the movie differently. And that goes to this old expression, comes from Heraclitus, and it's also been kind of recycled in different philosophies. But the idea is that no man ever stands in the same river twice, because the water is always different. It's moving. And so you revisit books that you've read before, you rewatch old movies, and the movies and the books will not be the same because you're not the same. So anyways, that's what we do at Geeky Stoics. But I think that that's really valuable for being a parent and relating to your children, is just taking that opportunity to do perspective changes and look at things from a different point of view, and hopefully encourage them to do the same. But it's hard to instill that in your children without overburdening them with your problems. you don't want to be like, remember all my problems. Okay. I'm trying to pay the mortgage. I'm working overtime hours because I'm trying to provide for you. My problems, my problems, my problems. You never want to push that on your child, but you want them to have empathy and to understand, dad is stressed right now because he's been working very hard and he's not doing it for fun. He's trying to feed you. You want your kids to understand that, but you don't want to rub it in their face, because that's not what that's not what a leader does.
Well, I mean, I think that, I do this thing. My daughter's is really into old music. I mean, all of my daughters are named after the Beatles. So my oldest daughter now is just jamming out to the Beatles every day. And she's finding new songs that she's like, what is that? And I'm like, that's the Rolling Stones. I've been hearing that for my whole life, right? But it's brand new to her, and she has a new perspective on it. So I put together a playlist of like all the old songs that she's listening to, but covers of them, and I labeled it different perspectives. And she doesn't like any of the different perspectives. She likes the originals. And I go, well, give it some time. Give it some time, and then come back to it later, and maybe you'll like this differently, you know?
Yeah, my daughter hates covers. It's like, it's really weird. Whenever I play cover songs in the car, she always judges them, and she's like, this is weird. Why are they covering this song? I'm like, well, people perform songs that they love and they put their own spin on them, and then you understand them differently. A great example of this is "It'll All Work Out" by Tom Petty. Both his song is it feels sad and hopeful in a weird way. You know, it seems like it's about a man and a woman who are trying to be there for each other, but it's this beautiful song with, I don't know, it's like a Chinese like harpsichord. It's a very strange, it's like it's played with a harp or something. And I never really understood the song, and it never hit me emotionally until I heard the cover of it by this singer-songwriter who's very popular right now named Phoebe Bridgers. And Phoebe Bridgers did this cover of "It'll All Work Out." Very sad, very slow, ambient guitar and piano. And I was like, whoa, now I get this song. Now the lyrics make sense in a different context. And I fell in love with "It'll All Work Out" by Tom Petty, but only after Phoebe Bridgers played it. Now I go back to the Tom Petty version, and I get it. I get now why this song is the way that it is, but I needed to hear it done differently in a different style that I recognize for me to appreciate. I had the same experience with Taylor Swift, 1989. Like, her whole album 1989 is covered by Ryan Adams, and he did "Shake It Off" like a Bob Dylan acoustic song, and I was like, wow, now I like this song. You know, and it was weird because I could listen to it in that form, played with a moody guitar and crooned like the lyrics. And then I could go back and listen to Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off." I was like, okay, there's some real craftsmanship, some real art going on here that I was blind to because it was pop music.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know, sometimes like the poppiness of it obscures the message, you know, because you get there's like two forms of the communication. There's what's being said and how it's being said, right? And the poppiness is how it's being said. So you might interpret the lyrics differently than how they were intended because it's packaged to sell. You know, everything's packaged to sell. It's got to be profitable for people to listen to it. And so, yeah, I think there's a difference to that. And I think that's why, you know, some of the older songs, why my daughter might, you know, be like, and your daughter as well, it sounds the same, is like, I don't like the new stuff. I want the original stuff. And, you know, because a lot of the stuff that's older, for the most part, is more consistent as far as like the lyrics and then the way that it's spoken. That Tom Petty one you gave is kind of a backwards example of that. But, you know, for the most part, I think a lot of songs are like that in the olden days. But yeah, the music and the key is like looking at it differently, right? Looking at the walking away, coming back and seeing something in a different light is just really important. Speaking of your politics, right? Because this is politics and parenting. When we met, I think I kind of thought of you as a libertarian. Through our relationship, I don't know, I kind of feel maybe a little bit more Republican, but, you know, are you a libertarian?
Well, the big words, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, those things are always changing. What they mean is constantly in flux based on where the parties are moving. So, you know, I prefer to go with the lowercase version of all those words. But I've always considered myself, when I say always, I mean since I was 24, a libertarian. In North Carolina, I was a registered libertarian, capital L. but have never voted for a libertarian candidate because they're all ridiculous and goofy, and I don't identify with them very much. But I guess what I would say to cut to the chase is that I am conservative by nature. I am sort of conservative Republican by nature. That's actually like who I am, who I was born as. I have a nature that aligns with those politics. But I choose to be libertarian. I've read Hayek, I've read Friedman. I believe that those ideas are correct. I think that libertarian and classical liberal ideas are correct. And so despite my nature, which sometimes is more reactionary conservative, I choose to be libertarian in the way that I think about politics, the way that I think about policy, letting go of some things that I would like to control, that I would like, to be a micromanager of. I believe it's correct to let some things go. And I think that's where libertarians are by and large right. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. Non-aggression principle. If it's not hurting anybody and it's an individual choice, then there's no crime, that kind of thing. So that's my long-winded answer to your very simple question.
So with, because you mentioned earlier, like how talking about Star Wars, how change is inevitable and you've got to be able to deal with that. And then, you right in this question is like, hey, the parties and what they stand for changes all the time. So, well, I might be a libertarian here and there. I might not always agree with them. What do you, as far as like libertarian as a governing policy, like, do you think they'll ever, you talk about the candidates are kind of goofy sometimes. Do you think there's ever going to be a libertarian candidate that's going to get elected? They just had Trump at their convention pushing
for him. Look at Argentina, Javier Milei. Javier Milei, the American media understands him as a Trump figure, but he's not. He's only a Trump figure in that he's bombastic and strange. He's like, the camera loves him, and he's very eccentric on television, and he says loud, kind of bizarre things. But he's a classical libertarian ideologue, like to his core, where Trump is a populist, law and order conservative, and a reactionary. So Argentina just elected one, so it's possible. But in order for Argentina to elect a libertarian philosopher and economist in Javier Milei, they had to have inflation that was almost at 30%, and for the economy to bottom out and prosperity almost vanish before they were willing to entertain somebody like that. So, will we get there? I hope not. I hope things don't have to get that bad that a libertarian has to appear to save us.
well, I'm just thinking like, the libertarian values and how can libertarians be for this guy and also Trump? And you just described how different they are.
They booed the guy out of the conference. The Libertarian Party is not the leadership. The people who are currently running the Libertarian Party are the Mises Caucus. There's different factions within every political party. Like in the Democrats, there's the Democratic Socialists of America, the Progressive Caucus, and then there's kind of what we used to call Blue Dog Democrats, but they're almost extinct. The more conservative Democrats. And in the Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus is this very right-wing reactionary, still very like anti-war and populist in that sense, faction. They are very Trumpian and they love the guy. And so they wanted him to come to the conference and speak and try to win over libertarian votes. But the Libertarian Party, the rank and file, the membership, the people on the ground, the Mises Caucus managed to win control of the party through like very smart internal politics, but libertarians don't like Trump. That's why he was getting booed throughout his entire speech. And he ended up arguing with the audience and going, fine, keep your 3%. You're all losers. So sorry, I didn't mean to like interrupt you, but I couldn't. I had to take the bait on that one. Yeah, the internal politics of the Libertarian Party are a mess.
You know what? It sounds very similar to the Republican and Democratic Party.
Yeah,
they're all a mess.
Yeah.
So that was a good impression, by the way. I had no idea. I've known you for years. I had no idea that you had such a good like.
But you've
Trump
never heard.
voice.
You've never heard my Barack Obama.
Oh,
Jeff,
I haven't heard your Barack Obama.
I believe that there is hope in America and for the Libertarian Party.
We're going to get like sued. People are going to think it's AI. They're going to be like, what? Obama's supporting libertarians now?
Yep. I'll do the AI chatbot for Obama.
So I wasn't planning to do this, but now I really have to know. Like, Obama, okay? Because where we are now in our politics is so strange. And we're talking about Trump and we're talking about the libertarians and all these different things. But I think a lot of this stuff, the divisiveness really started under Obama. Would you agree or would you disagree? I mean, there's always divisiveness in politics. I think it was just a new type of divisiveness.
Yeah. Gosh, it's tough because I've heard this commentary before that like the divisiveness started under Obama, and it's hard because I voted for the guy in 2008. I liked the hope and change thing. I couldn't get on board with McCain. It was just too much of the same old after the 8 years of Bush, who I mostly liked. But, Obama was a hopeful, transcendent figure. He represented a post-racial America. There's no red America, no blue America, just America. He's mixed race, so he, what was it? Black dad, white mom? Was that, I think that was it. The dynamic on his family side. And there was a huge amount of hope there, but something went wrong after the Trayvon Martin shooting. When Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida, and then after Michael Brown and the hands up, don't shoot myth, Obama went in a different direction. I think that cynicism that was within him that he had either suppressed or moved on from came back. Something in him either changed or reasserted itself. And Obama went in a very different direction, talking about the sins of America, becoming hostile towards the police, talking about sort of inherent racism in white America. And it was because, his popularity was declining. He was not getting consensus in Congress. He represented a transcendent figure, but he could not transcend partisan politics. And so he got a little mean and the shine came off, and then the divisiveness went into overdrive. So
do you think that might have something to do with the fact that he just wasn't ready to be president? I mean, he was I don't know, a newer congressman. I think back and I kind of compare a little bit with Obama and Kennedy, right? Kennedy, he didn't have a lot of legislative experience. He was incredibly charismatic, incredibly thoughtful, well-spoken. Mm-hmm. He could unite people together with that hope that Obama was able to do. Yeah. But realistically, Kennedy struggled once as president in getting his legislation enacted. That's one of the things. When he was assassinated and LBJ came in, the first thing that LBJ said is, we're going to get civil rights done. Mm-hmm. And Kennedy laid the foundation with bringing people on board to it with the emotion and to it. And LBJ actually had the legislative skills to get it done in Congress.
That's right.
And I kind of feel maybe that was Obama's. He wasn't able to actually do the things in Congress he needed to do. So he tried to lean too much on his, personality to drive change.
Cult of personality. It worked for him to get across the election. But after that, when it came to governance, it worked against him. I think about Kennedy, and, he got steamrolled by the CIA on Bay of Pigs. He had to figure out how Washington and the emerging idea of the deep state or the intelligence agencies was working at the time. He was inexperienced and he was getting rolled. And then he had a success despite his weaknesses with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it's also true. Yeah, he didn't execute on civil rights, and LBJ did. But, we also have a very LBJ-like president in office right now, and Joe Biden, in that he's an old guard. He has been around politics since time immemorial. I thought Joe Biden was going to have the capability and the political savvy to overcome silliness in Washington, D.C. I really did believe that. Joe Biden is a politician who he can measure the wind, and he just goes where the wind is blowing. And he has a history of backslapping with, Southern segregationists and Republicans during the 80s. He was a law and order Clinton guy in the early 90s. He basically just follows and swivels wherever the energy is. And for some reason, that has led Biden to being an extreme leftist president on cultural issues, which that Joe Biden knows nothing about, but he just says the things. And I've been hugely disappointed, because I thought he had the political savvy to be a moderate and to backslap his way through Washington, and he hasn't done that. And I'm shocked. I really am.
So I think what your perspective of that is what a lot of people, especially the Republicans who didn't want to vote for Trump, that ended up supporting Biden and that got him elected. I think a lot of them felt the same way that you felt. They were like,
yeah, I think so.
And they're all disappointed, which is why we see Trump potentially. I mean, I think he's in the lead at this point, getting back to the White House, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Biden has taken this different path. Now, do you have any ideas of why he's taken this different path? I have my theories, but I'd like to hear yours.
I don't want to speak out of school and say something, based on suspicions, but he's not present. He is dealing with early onset senility. He is not fully in control of what's going on in the White House. So there's two factors at play. He historically has always gone where the energy is. And the energy in the Democratic Party is with, LGBTQ politics, the transgenderism phase, and, youth politics on environment and climate issues. And that's where he has run. But, as we know about the youth vote, the energy is there, but usually the voting power is not there when they don't actually show up and vote on those issues. So I think that his senility and his historical preference for following the energy has led him to this position where somebody, whether it be a chief of staff, his staff, or his wife, Jill, are running the show. So,
yeah, I mean, Jill is the one out there doing the interviews on The View, not Joe Biden. And a lot of times when you see them on camera together, she's literally holding his hand and guiding him where to go.
Yeah.
And so, again, I understand your perspective. Like, you're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. We're not trying to diagnose the president of the United States. But I think that as individual citizens, we all see the same thing. And we've all seen that in our fathers and grandfathers.
We have loved ones. I hate this line where it's like, you're not a doctor. No, I have eyes. I have eyes, and I have family. Like we all know what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that makes it, for me, it makes, I think it makes a lot of people angry. For me, it makes me sad, because I think
sad. Yeah.
I look at Joe Biden and I think, he's tarnishing his legacy, right? I mean, more than anything. And then, he's also doing a little bit of harm to the country along the way, which he'll be remembered for. And then he probably doesn't want to be remembered for these things. And he might not be completely aware of everything that, of his actions, because he's trapped inside of a small sphere, listening to the energy of the party and not the whole country. And I think that's, not great.
Read the room, my friend. And it does make me sad. My daughter and I talk about this often, because I do not encourage fist banging, table conversations on politics. I I encourage in my household respect and deference, towards your commander in chief, respect towards, our government officials, even when they disappoint and frustrate me. I just do not believe in irreverence when it comes to our leaders. And so we talk about that in our house in the context of sadness. He's a very old man, and it's not fair. Senility is not fair. Mental decline in old age is not fair. Warren Buffett still running around trucking. Donald Trump, he has a couple stumbles here and there, but he still has his mental faculties, and they're like the same age. It doesn't hit everybody differently. My great grandma, when she finally passed away at 94, she was completely with it. she was all there. Her mind had stayed. Her body was not able to stay. And Joe Biden has been chasing the presidency since the 80s. This was like his third attempt. He ran in the 80s or the 90s. Then he ran against Obama, and then he ran and finally won. He's been after this for 30 years, and he gets it. And then within the first 2 or 3 years, boom, old age sets in hard, and he loses his mental faculties. And that's very sad. I think that's a sad story. And I think old men and women that age, they should be with their loved ones. They should be reading a book and, being with grandchildren. I just, that's how I feel. And, there's no set age when I think someone should not be allowed to serve public office. I'm not sure about age limits, but it's very clear to me that he doesn't belong here right now. And it's sad because he has been after this his whole life.
Yeah. I think you brought up an issue point. The way that he's kind of been chasing after it, and he is this political creature that zigs and zags and follows the energy. Yeah. He reminds me a little bit of Buchanan, which, Buchanan is considered probably the worst president in the United States history. So it's not really he doesn't want to put his name in the same line as that, but unfortunately he has. And Buchanan did not have the same issues that Biden has as far as the senility that I am aware of, but he definitely was not successful as a president and definitely did a lot to help to continue the divide that he took over, because Buchanan and Biden both took over during very, very partisan, divisive times. And, so far Buchanan did nothing to heal it, and Biden has done nothing to heal it as well. But let's change focus a little bit here, Stephen. So we have known each other for some time, and I've known you as an author and a father and a podcaster, and now you've changed perspectives. You're entering a different world, and you're running for Manassas City Council here locally. Mm-hmm. What drove you to want to be part of the other side and be in office?
Well, there are a couple different ways to answer that question. I think one is there are people who, from a very early age, are like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an actor, I want to be a writer, I want to, be in the Senate. I love politics. I always have been very interested in it. I always, reading stories about Julius Caesar, was very interested in the guys in the togas surrounding him in the Senate. I love politics. And so I always wanted to be in it. So that's one. Politics interests me. It's possibly my vocation in one way, shape, or form. So on the local level, though, in terms of what we need, this was not on my to-do list. I was actually having a very nice year. Good job, stable home life, homeschooling our child, enjoying a lot of free time and using that to do something that you and I enjoy, read and write. And I just blew it all up and decided to get in the race for city council because there was a need. There was a opening where no one was stepping in to fill, the ticket to run in Manassas. And then I just keep hearing from my neighbors the two same things over and over and over again. I can't afford to live in this city anymore if things don't change. If they keep raising the property taxes, if they keep, if the cost of living and of rent keeps increasing in this area, there's no way that I can live here another couple of years. That's one. And then the other thing is just moms and parents, particularly people who have immigrated here from Central and South America, crying about the quality of the schools and being afraid for their children's safety when they go to middle school or high school here. Manassas has a big education problem. We have wonderful teachers, dedicated school administrators, but we have a lot of people to serve and a culture that has emerged that embraces low standards, both on academics for children and for behavioral expectations while in the building. And, we've got a truancy issue where high schoolers are roaming downtown Manassas, like packs of wolves. They can't all be taken back to the building. We don't have enough police officers for it. And school administrators don't know how to keep them in the building. So something's broken. The schools aren't working. The cost of living keeps going up, 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 up. And there was a need. And I am very, very tired of seeing contemptible, unwise, advantageous, or what would be the word? People who take advantage of every situation running for office. And so I decided, why don't I step in? Why don't I step in and bring some of my background, my unique interests, and my desire to see a better quality of politics in this area? Why don't I step in? And again, this was not on my to-do list this year. My life is now much more complicated, much more busy, but it needs to happen because somebody has to do it.
Yeah. So I like how you describe that. And, it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier with like looking at things from a different perspective. I think average citizens that just go and vote look at the representatives that they vote for a certain way, and they've never actually put themselves in that seat to look at it from the authority's position. The amount of sacrifice, like you said, you kind of blew up your thing, right? You had a good thing going, you had a good year going, and now you've decided to serve, and that means you have more sacrifice to make. Time with your family. I'm sure it's going to be costly running the campaign, so it's going to be challenging. It's great that you're willing to step up, because we need good people stepping up and trying to make things better. You brought up your two main points of the cost of living in Manassas is going up, and the education. What, as Manassas City Councilman, can you do to help those things?
Yeah, so it's tough. Cost of living is a nationally rising tide that we are seeing, largely driven by federal government spending and inflation. So, we're getting crushed at the gas pump, and we're getting crushed at the grocery store and at Walmart buying our retail goods. But there are things that happen locally that play a big part in the cost of living. So I mentioned property taxes. That's one. Steady increases year over year. I mean, my wife and I have 2 sedans, and combined on our property taxes last year, we had to pay a tax bill of about $550, $600. That's a huge amount of money when you live paycheck to paycheck anywhere. So that's like one example. And the people who have big homes in Manassas are getting blown away by taxes every year as well. But then there's also a development problem in Northern Virginia more broadly, Northern Virginia and the Manassas city limits. There are not enough houses going up. There is not enough homes being built. We have incredibly onerous and restrictive zoning throughout the city because Manassas is only 10 square miles in any given direction. It's a very small locality, but with a population of 42,000 and very little housing stock being built. So if you are like me and you're a first-time home buyer who got into a townhome pre-COVID and pre-inflation, for something like $200,000, right now, the only places that you can move up to, the only available housing stock, are brand new condos that are popping up here and there in town that are like $800,000, or a very, very small selection of single family homes that are more mid-budget, like $400,000, $500,000. and there just aren't enough. So you're seeing a lot of people stay put in their homes because there are not other places to move and interest rates are high. So
Mm.
again, long-winded answer to your question, but housing and development is a real core of the affordability problem. There's only a couple of apartment complexes in Manassas, and there are not a lot of zoning opportunities for more apartments to be built. And when there isn't high stock, prices go up. And in
Mm.
Manassas, rent prices have increased 20% since 2021. For perspective, on average in Manassas, that is an extra $420 per month on average for renters. And if you are a renter, $450, again, a huge chunk of money. That is at least 2 full grocery runs if you are a family of 3. And if you are a family of 4, 5, someone like you, right, that might just barely scratch the surface for your monthly grocery. So this is really hurting people. Now, the schools come into play in that when there are not good schools in a city, people don't move there. High skilled people who are high income earners are not going to move their family to Manassas unless they have to. If you have a middle schooler and you're looking at possible high schools, you get a job at the Pentagon or in Washington, D.C., and you're going to take the VRE train into the city for work, and you got to pick where you're going to live, you're going to look on Google at the school map, and then you're going to look at
Mm.
school ratings. And you know where you're going to go if you really love your children and you have options? Haymarket, Gainesville, somewhere that's not Manassas, because Osborne High School is our only option, and it is not impressive. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not horrible, but it's not impressive. And if you had
Mm.
choices, you would not send them there. And so what happens is then you atrophy people. Your population only grows with people who don't actually pay that much in taxes or don't pay
Mm.
taxes at all. And then you know what happens? The city has to raise taxes on the people who are here because the tax base is not growing. People is good. I'm actually not like anti, influx. I want more people here. I want houses for them to live in, and I want them to pay taxes so that then taxes can come down on everybody else.
So it sounds like you want to oversee a location that's desirable, because a location that's desirable is going to be able to pay its bills, because it's got to be able to grow, right? Like you mentioned, you don't want it to atrophy. You need to continue to grow by adding housing and apartments and all these different things. And you have to invest in the city itself at the core foundations of education. I mean, going all the way back to the founding, our founders were very adamant about how important education was. In Manassas, we see a lot of investment in different things, but I don't necessarily know if we're seeing it in the school system. It doesn't sound like it's being there because people aren't happy with it.
Yeah, and investment in the schools is a very fraught subject because when you say we need to invest in our schools, Republicans and Democrats mean different things. Democrats mean pay raises for the teachers, new school books, which new school books are a good thing, and possibly infrastructure updates to the schools, improved air conditioning, more light through the windows so that students don't feel like they're in a prison. Maybe new school buildings altogether because the ones that you're currently in were built in 1960 or something like that. And we are building a new elementary school in Manassas. Jenny Dean is getting an entirely new building. It's unclear what
Nice.
will happen to Jenny Dean Elementary when the new building is built. But I think that's a good thing. Osborne, though, similarly, very old. And honestly, I don't want a new Osborne. We just need a second high school. We actually need to just build a new high school and split our student body population between 2 buildings. And then we
Mm.
need school resource officers, police officers, in order to help keep those schools safe, keep students on campus, and in addition to investing in our schools, we need to actually just push the city school board here in Manassas to impose higher standards on students and roll back the lowering of standards that we saw during COVID with aggressive passing of students who are not doing homework, the aggressive passing of students who are completely failing their tests for math and English and literature. They are getting passing grades so that teachers can round them up to passing scores at the end of the year. And it is failing our city. It's failing our business community who need qualified workers in order to enter the workforce. The low standards and the lack of rules in the buildings, it has to stop. And so that's where the language is going to come in. It's not about more money. It's also about what we think the money is for.
Yeah.
You know, we got to change a lot more than just upping the budget.
I think you hit on something that I hear from teachers all the time. You mentioned you just need another high school, right? Teachers that I speak to there's too many kids in their classrooms. It becomes difficult to get a large group of people to reach all the standards when you don't have the resources. You've got too many people in there. Maybe the kids aren't getting the extra help at home that they need. And so this causes the administration or whatever, it causes a problem for them. Do you leave these large group of people back, or do you pass them and move them forward? You know, and if you thought about the problem differently and you said, well, maybe we can get more of them to actually reach the standards if we made the classroom size smaller, if we added a new school, we added more teachers, we gave the children more support. I think when you're investing in something, you kind of want to invest in the person first before you invest in the, whatever entertainment value or you get out of school.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I've been told this a couple of times by city elites when I broach the idea of needing a second high school. They go, "Don't touch that. Like, that's too explosive, controversial, expensive." And I just go, "Why?" I went to a couple of yard sales over the weekend because I like to campaign at yard sales. So go to yard sale, check out some stuff, buy something, and then talk to the homeowner in their front yard. And I kept hearing actually that like the high school is overcrowded, too many people. We could use a second one. I go, I want a second high school. And it's going to be complicated, but that's what cities do. We do complicated things. We see a problem and we figure out a way to get to the solution. And the city has money. They just spent like $14 million buying a strip mall on Mathis Avenue so that they can develop it into mixed use housing and shopping. For some reason, that's the city's development project rather than a private business interest. Doesn't make much sense to me. And the city also bought the Old Town Inn for a way bigger number, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it is currently a vacant parking lot in the middle of historic downtown. So don't tell me there's no money. We're just spending it on the wrong things. And, I think, again, teachers would like smaller classroom sizes. And we also are understaffed in the police department. The resource officers don't have enough people on the force to keep kids on the school property and to return them to the building. I talked with one of the officers, Officer Rodriguez, and he would like to see the city invest in a housing program that's a lottery system for new entrants to the police force. So basically incentivize police officers from other cities to come to Manassas, and on a lottery system, they go through a professional training and development program so they can become better police officers. And while they're doing that, they get some housing. And, I'm a little uncertain about how I feel like anytime you're talking about government supplied housing, but I've heard worse ideas for how to spend money. I have heard worse ideas for how to spend money than incentivizing police officers to come to the city. So,
it sounds
every time you
like
spend money, you're saying yes to one thing and you're saying no to something else.
Yeah. So, it sounds like the city is saying yes to trying to bring new revenue into the city, bring more people in because they're paying for real estate and they're developing themselves, which again, I'm kind of on your side. Why is the city doing that? Right. Why isn't a private company doing this? Right. But they're not investing in what makes people want to move to an area. Every single mom and dad that has decided to move, one of the first things they do when they get the housing list from their realtor is they go through and they check the schools, like you mentioned. When my wife and I moved, that was the first thing that we looked at. And the fact that the city is investing in these other things and doesn't seem as concerned about the school situation, I can see why you want to run. I can see why you jumped in this race.
Yeah, I just think we're not having the right conversations in this city, and the lack of priorities and the sort of making it up as you go along is not working for the interests of the people here. And you nailed it. Why do people come to a city? It's not because of a new restaurant on Mathis Avenue. I like restaurants, by the way. I would like far more of them. But that's not what they're looking for. You got to get down to the fundamentals: public safety, staffing and quality of the police department, fire engine response times, school quality. And we have a school board here in the city. They're trying very hard, but they need a perspective change. And I'm not running for school board, I'm running for city council. What's my perspective and role in that? Pressure. The school board and the city council, they need to be working with each other, and the city council needs to be setting the tone for what this city's priorities are. And that means just adding that pressure, using the bully pulpit where you can to say, like, this needs to be our priority: higher standards, safety in the classroom, expectations in the hallways.
Yeah, that's fantastic. When you're done running for city council, why don't you come out to Prince William County and instill some of those things into ours as well?
Yeah, I have a lot of time. That sounds good.
You could just do it all, Stephen. I was reading earlier.
Stephen Kent is on the city council in 3 cities. Did you know that? Can he do that?
I literally I'm reading a whole bunch of newspaper articles from the early 1800s, and actually, yes, a lot of people used to do stuff like that. They used to sit on 3 or 4 different councils or governorships, and they used to run this just because it seems there's always been an issue of good people stepping up and governing, right? Because it's not really it's a sacrifice that you make. Everybody kind of looks up to the people in charge, but they just don't realize that how much work it takes. And I know that you know this, and you're about to find out a lot harder than or a lot more than most people because you're going through the race now.
Yeah, and I keep getting asked this, like, what's your issue with the current city council? And I think people are always looking for a personal answer. Tom Osina did this, Mark Wolf did this, the mayor said this, and that's why I'm running. It's not personal. It's not personal. It's not about that. It's about looking around the city, talking to your neighbors, and are you getting a positive or a negative impression about the direction the city is going? And then you run in order to channel those people's perspectives, their feelings, their hopes, and their dreams, and try to be a voice for those things on the city council. And it's not that they've, done nothing bad. They've had a couple of bad calls. I mentioned the empty, parking lot concrete slab where the Old Town Inn used to be at Manassas. That's one. But, people act like it has to be personal and like grudge politics whenever you get into a race. And it's not. It's just about getting Manassas where it needs to be. And right now it seems like we're spinning our wheels.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, I've really appreciated you joining the show today. Wide array of conversation from, philosophy and stoicism all the way down to local grassroots politics and community, growing. Manassas is a place I've lived here my whole life. I've gone to Manassas a lot. I've never lived in the city of Manassas, but I've lived very close to it. I've always been in the county, but it's a place that I love. I love the Old Town area. I think it's special. I had somebody on the show last week. he lives in New Jersey, and he mentioned how special Manassas is in the old town that we have, because he's been by. And you can't replicate the history that we have here, and the desire for people to want to be here for that history. You just need to give them the foundation, like you're talking about. So I'm really glad that you're running. I appreciate you being on the show today. You want to, what do they call that at the end of the shows where
Plug?
Plug. That's the word I'm looking for. Thanks, Stephen.
So for the campaign, kentformanassas.com. That's Kent, F-O-R, Manassas.com. It goes without saying, I would appreciate your support, any financial contributions you can make to the campaign. This will not be expensive for me, because I don't have money to put into a campaign for political office. I don't have it. So this is supported by the donors and the voters who care about the future of Manassas, and I'd appreciate your contributions. And then you can read my writing over at geekystoics.com. That's where I write about pop culture and philosophy, and you can get a little bit of a sense of how I think about the world, my heart, and some of my interests.
Yeah, and for the voters out there, because I try to talk about this a lot before we get out of here, you want to be able to know your candidate. And candidates that write and put their heart out there and their ideas and what they believe in, if they write like that, go read them and give them an opportunity like Stephen has presented himself. And then if you're an average citizen, don't think that somebody wealthy is going to come by and lift up the guy that you support. You need to donate to them. $25, $5, $10, whatever you can. If you are looking for real change and building a real foundation in the city of Manassas, reach out to Stephen, have a conversation with him. And if you're on board with his ideas, then support him, because that's if we want to make change in our country, want to make change in our communities, we have to support people that we believe in, and we have to believe that they're going to be able to get in there and be competent when they're in office. So it starts at the grassroots level. It starts with an average citizen just donating and lifting up a good voice in the community. All right, Stephen, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Peace and love.